Okay, we are, I think, now recording, and I've just switched on captions as well. So let's now share my screen, and then we will be in business. I think I'm now sharing. So welcome to our weekly call. You could see I had a little bit of time on my hands this morning, so I was playing with generative AI for new improved graphics. I'll leave that to the viewer to decide whether they are improved. I can categorically say that they are new, although probably derivative, sort of knowing how generative AI works. Originally, we'd planned, sorry, and I should say, and thank you to our long-term sponsor of the call, DNS, whose support is very much appreciated. We had planned originally on the call this week, you may remember the schedule was to talk about sort of dot and doc, so DNS over TLS and over quick with authoritatives, but we had a late change, which I mentioned last week. Sarah wasn't able to do it, and in fact I've juggled it around. I'll give you the sort of revised schedule for future topics at the end of this call, because we have a agenda running through to December. But so Sarah is now on the revised schedule, but not today. So I'm not her. So apologies if you are hoping to talk about that. So we're going to spend a little bit more time this week just talking about some of the stuff that's happening in the news, of which there's loads actually this week for some bizarre reason, and just generally have a time to see what's currently on people's minds. So that's the plan for a call. I'll walk through some of the recent developments, just remind you some stuff that's coming up, and there'll be time at the end, I'm sure, for, as I say, a discussion of things that are currently on people's minds, other stuff that I've not mentioned, etc. So be prepared to jump in with your stuff. But in the meantime, in terms of stuff that's in the news, I hadn't seen it earlier, but I came across an article from Josh, who's often on these calls, although he's not dialed in at the moment, from Infoblox. Talking about blockchain-based naming systems. You might surmise from the title of the article, a solution in search of a problem, that he was somewhat skeptical possibly, and in fact that turned out to be the case. It didn't really, in my read of the article, identify any obvious reason why anyone would want to use sort of blockchain-based naming system in preference to, if you like, the DNS, given the level of maturity of the latter. And that will link to another article which I'll come on to. But let me pause there because Peter has raised his hand.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I know you only just started, but I wanted to say about this article. I think Josh is basically right. There isn't any point in the the blockchain naming system, but I don't think that's really the point of that. The reason it won't go away. I think it's about another sort of, in my opinion, I think it's a lot to do with the sort of next generation of geeks wanting to kind of tack on a naming system into something that they're enthusiastic about and their energy and interest in something, and also be part of like the formation of something like this, and figuring out, the same problems that other people have already figured out. It's not possible to be a greybeard in DNS anymore. You can't sort of become one. So they found their own thing to be excited about, which is, I
Yes.
think, yeah.
Yeah, I remember you sort of making loosely that point sort of before, Peter. I think there's a point well made that people invent new things because they're bored with the old things.
Yeah.
There are no discernible advantages of the new things, and that's
Yeah.
absolutely fine. And in fact, I should say there is a talk on loosely on the same topic at the OARC meeting in Stockholm, but from someone from the Ethereum naming system, who I'm reasonably confident, obviously I haven't seen the talk yet, will be much more positively disposed towards the idea. In fact, I know they are, although they are talking about some of the sort of naming system abuse issues. So post that meeting, I will probably see if I can arrange for, I can't remember the name of the speaker, but that person plus maybe Josh to get together on a call to talk about it. And I think that will lead to an interesting discussion to sort of talk about it from both sides. But I can see a number of people got a point on that, so I'll take them in the order that they're on my screen. So Alexi, then Tom, and then Ross. So in turn. So Alexi first. If you're able to unmute. Actually, I think you are unmuted, but there's no sound coming through. Okay, let's go to Tom and see if Alexi can overcome his ability to input. So I will come back to you, Alexi, but Tom.
It got me thinking, and thinking about DNS on blockchain. The number of times I've thought, I wish I knew what this DNS record used to point to. I know there are those kind of DNS history sites out there that are a bit sort of chocolate teapot-esque in their utility. It's just been an interesting thing to think about for a bit. Like, how many times have you thought, I wish I knew what the history of this DNS name was? And then conversely, if there was like an immutable log of everything this record had ever pointed to, how many times do you curse it as someone who has DNS records? How many times do you think, oh, crikey, I hope no one sees that I had that pointed there? It's like, I think it would be that particular aspect would be like an amazingly double-edged sword. And probably if someone brighter than me might want to blog about it, because they could think someone could find it quite amusing.
Yeah, fair point. I hadn't thought of that. But yeah, that would be an advantage potentially. So hold that thought for if I manage to arrange that discussion on either side. That definitely could be a feature that's currently lacking. So very good. Ross maybe channeling his inner Josh, or maybe not.
Yeah, I can't say I'm going to channel Josh, but I will say that obviously I tend to agree with him on it. He and I have discussed this at length. One of the interesting things that, the point that you and Peter made of, them being excited about a technology and wanting to use it for this, that's one thing. But part of the other thing that I find slightly flawed in the logic behind all of it is it seems that a lot of the people that are championing it are saying, its advantage is that it's decentralized. But yet that in and of itself is the inherent problem with that approach, because the whole reason the DNS works is because of the stakeholder model that's already formed over many, many years. So I don't know how you would find a way without some central governing authority to actually make it a usable technology, at the scale the DNS works at today.
Yeah. And to be honest, I think most of the proponents seem to focus mainly on the fact that you own the thing, that there's no censorship, that sort of thing, as an aspect more than other stuff. But I'm as skeptical probably as Josh, but it will be an interesting discussion to have someone who actually thinks it's a generally good idea to make the case. But yeah, fair point. And I can see Alexis had some technical problems. So you rejoined the queue. So excellent, Alexi. So Kathy first, then we'll come back to Alexi, and hopefully we'll be up and running. So Kathy.
This is just a short bit of input to say that I'm aware that the speaker who is speaking at the upcoming OAuth workshop does have quite a few different topics on which they could speak. So it would be well worth having a chat with them to see if there's something interesting that you could do maybe on a future webcast or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yes, completely forgetting that you would know that given your role as chair of the programme committee. So,
I would happen to know that, yes.
and I have to say, I had a proper look through the agenda over the weekend and sort of earmarked a number of really interesting presentations. So I actually had a chance to read some of the descriptions rather than just go by the titles. So I was actually rather impressed.
We find ourselves in the delightful but also very difficult position of having probably twice as much material, if not more, plus the things that had missed the deadline as well. So even more material to choose between, and it was very hard. And we're very much hoping that some of the material that we couldn't take this time will find its way into the next workshop.
Yeah. And certainly, I know Willem sort of made a similar point about the embarrassment of riches on the call last week. So, yeah, nice problem to have, I guess. It makes your job a bit harder.
It did, yes. Writing all of the individual accepts and rejects took a very long time.
Yes, I bet. Okay, noted. Thank you. And I also noticed in the comments in the chat from Alexi about the Zoom Firefox client, which seems to have some odd aspects to it with watermarking, etc. But anyway, Alexi, it looks like you've solved your technical problem, so you wanted to make a point as well.
Yeah, well, so I was running the native Zoom client, which kept crashing. So now I'm just connecting using a normal browser. But the point I wanted to make was based on what Peter said, that about the blockchain-based naming systems. I seem to recall several separate hash-based DNS alternatives from the past 2 decades, or maybe even a little longer than that, especially in relation to publish subscribe style internet alternatives or internet overlay systems. So, and I think those might actually have some potential if, and it's a big if they ever get adopted and implemented in big enough numbers.
Yeah.
And are not buggy and stuff like that. But the huge problem with basic IP infrastructure, internet infrastructure, is that there are billions of devices, some of which are smaller than the nail of your little finger, that have implemented these basic protocols, and fitting anything else on them is difficult and not possible after the fact.
Yeah, I guess there's some pretty big sort of barriers to entry generally to supplant the DNS. But also on your point about fitting things in, I'll sort of maybe mention this probably later. I did see that some solar-powered, I think IoT devices have been found to have unexpected radio transmitters in them. So some enterprising companies seem to have found ways to fit certain extra features in their devices, slightly changing the point you were making, but maybe not for good purposes. But we will come back to that because it links to a future talk that we have on the horizon. But yeah, good point as well. Who knew there was so much to talk about blockchain DNS? We will definitely come back to this on a future call. Okay, moving on. Second one I wanted to mention, which I also mentioned last week, but came back for more, which is the sort of blog post by Yevhenia Noisk of Core Labs, and I apologise in advance to her because she will be coming on the call in a few weeks' time, who wrote initially, I saw it on IPNIC, discovering the discovery of designated resolvers, just looking at the sort of DDR specifically, roughly or just under 2 years after the RFC came out, and she identified some concerns around centralization. And I then saw on LinkedIn, hence this this second one on the screen, sort of Tommy Jensen, one of the co-authors of the DDR RFC, sort of responded to a couple of comments and thought that there was an error in the post, and that maybe the author sort of misinterpreted how DDR was meant to function, but it turned out that the article was right. It was being misused, which I thought was particularly interesting. So I put the sort of link in there. The discussion was on LinkedIn, and it will certainly be worth your while if you've not already seen it. Just reading through the comments, including the latest response from Tommy on that. I see David has raised his hand as an implementer of DDR. Do come in, David.
Thank you, Andrew. I just wanted to point out that this kind of research is, as Tommy says, is very helpful, but by the same token, it cannot by design uncover organizations globally that support DDR internally, right? Because that is simply not available to researchers, generally speaking. So I would be, if anybody ever found to do that kind of research in some kind of practical way, that would be super interesting for those of us that are very active in internal non-public deployments.
Yeah, although as you say, by their nature, that will be a tougher thing to research. But actually, we will come back to this topic in December when Henya, I will learn how to pronounce the name properly, will come on the call, and she will talk more generally. She'll talk about this, but also more generally about DNR, and so just broaden the subject somewhat. So you could make that point to her then in person, but because it's quite interesting, I think, that she's researching this area. It's the first thing I've come across sort of looking at this pretty much at all, so it was good to see. But as I say, I found the discussion between Tommy and Gautam quite helpful, and then also I think Tommy had a sort of side discussion with Yevgenia as well. So made it quite interesting. Okay, third one on here, and I'll speed up with some of the others because these are the most interesting ones, which is why I put them first. It was on XDA, which has coincidentally had a series of interesting posts over the last few weeks, DNS related. Someone had set up their own split horizon DNS in their home lab using Bind9 Unbound, and then ultimately connected to Quad 9. Which Darren, I'm sure, will be really pleased to know that. But I should describe how they've gone through their setup. So if anyone has an interest in setting up their own home-based split horizon environment, then there's a sort of pseudo step-by-step guides to that from Samir Makwama in XDA that you may find of interest. Okay, moving on. Speaking of David and Adam Networks, David had previously written about exploitation of the text record, and was impressed to see that Business Wire sort of picked that up and amplified that. So we discussed that a little just in passing on this call a few weeks ago, and in fact, to be fair, Peter had sort of in his bizarre and unusual uses of the DNS, had also sort of talked about sort of text records, made reference to his previous presentation on the joy of text. So they sort of teased this out then, because there were some exploits around the text records that came to light, I think a couple of months ago, August actually. So only last month thinking about it. So about 5-6 weeks ago. So David wrote some more about that, and as I say, Business Wire amplified that. I also saw an interesting piece on, as you can see, DNS tunneling as a covert data exfiltration and command and control vector. Well, we all know that the DNS can be misused, but particularly for command and control by malware. So there's a sort of interesting article on that which I found also on LinkedIn, which although it does go on to then look at some of the mitigation techniques, which was good to see. And similarly, Cisco put a piece out on how attackers hijack the DNS. So similar sort of subject matter, which then went on to make reference to the draft of NIST Secure DNS Deployment Guide, which I'm sure Ross will be pleased to see that people are referencing that even in its draft state, which is good news.
Yeah, I'm hoping for the final version very soon. I'd love to see it this week, but we'll see.
Yeah, coming out imminently then. That's good to know. Okay. And then some more stuff. I won't go through all of these, but for example, Rapperbot, an IoT botnet that again use command and control with encrypted DNS text records. Just going back to the point about text records, some more stuff on the Salt Typhoon, which was probably a big thing only 12 months ago, and it's certainly not gone away. There's a really, in my view, really poor article on censorship and control start with the DNS. Poor in the sense that, you could, I think, take that and make an argument on that basis, but the article was quite small and with no evidence to back up the claims it made. So it's just a bit hand wavy. Bad stuff happens in the DNS with slightly misleading references to DNS for EU. To public resolvers like DNS for EU offering optional content filtering. So I was underwhelmed with that article. Peter, did you share my underwhelmingness, or a different point?
No, I absolutely did. But no, you're right, different point. I just wanted to say, I for one applaud and welcome you adding your opinion on news articles rather than just being the kind of like independent BBC style. I think is good. So thank you. That's all.
Oh, you're most welcome. I won't always do that, but if I think they're particularly good, or in this case particularly bad, I think that's warranted. I mean, a lot of them, to be fair, they're fairly self-explanatory, but yeah, that one I was not impressed with. It seemed like pretty lazy to me. Conversely, there was an interesting piece on non-compliance and managing risks with DNS filtering by Corey Underdown of DNS Filter. Now, to be fair, DNS Filter would clearly think that DNS filtering is a good thing, the clue's in the name after all. But he did pull out some interesting points as to why a CISO, for example, may want to pay attention to the DNS and what some of the consequences of not doing so would be. So it wasn't a really technical piece, it was more of sort of softer policy and other issues, which I thought was quite interesting as an angle. So written for a slightly different audience, I felt. And then finally, the last few, a nice piece from Michael Pelage, who often on this call, just scanning down, he's not on today. No, he's not on today. Posing the question: has ICANN become a de facto trade association with a very thin veneer of multi-stakeholderism? To quote a piece from his article in Circle ID, and yeah, he makes a case about whether it's morphed from the sort of STO type role that it had, and is it really just as I said, a trade association with wings, as it were. So just questioning whether it has sufficient independence through its sort of governance processes, which are I think that warrants further exploration as a subject, and you could probably make the same point about some other of the I-star type bodies potentially. Tom.
Yeah, I was just going to make the point that it's always challenging with anybody when there's like a bunch of volunteer spots on there. In order to be a volunteer, I think, like, in order to go into public life and just about anything, you need money, and money invariably comes from somewhere with strings attached at the very least.
Yeah. I mean, fair point. I think you could reasonably say that most of the places, as you say, are relying on volunteers as they apply. I think this would be true of most of the I-star organisations to a greater or lesser extent. So if you're, say, thinking about the ITF, an area director, you're devoting sort of typically 50% plus of your time to that role, funded by your company. So by definition, that's mainly going to be large employers, not necessarily commercial organisations. There are some academics have sort of taken those roles as well, but it certainly would rule out a lot of NGOs, small businesses, etc. I would imagine from doing that, even if there's no intent for bias or anything. Peter.
So my thought on that was, like, isn't that just how the internet's always worked, though? Like all the standards and organizations and everything. I mean, very little of it is actually by true volunteers who are just volunteering their time. They're all, if you look at all the original RFCs, they're all at IBM.com and at HP.com and stuff like that. I thought that's how it's always been, kind of.
I think it's yes, but more so now. I'm sort of agreeing and disagreeing, which is simultaneous, which is quite a clever trick when you think about it. I do wonder whether it's, if you go back to the early days of the ITF, it was a bunch of people who had a shared common interest. So it was more amateur, even if they came from similar organisations. It was less intentional. Just by nature of being more mature now than it was then, probably a lot less of a time commitment as well, to be fair, because it was a lot smaller. And it was people who, a bit like with personal computers, back in the day, it was a hobby for people primarily. Same largely with the internet, whereas that's clearly not really the case so much now.
And more often they came from universities back then than now.
Yeah, that's fair as well. Yeah, it was a sort of large amount of academia then, and of course, those of you who remember the first .coms, that was thought of as a terrible thing. Bringing commercialization into the internet. That generated a lot of extremely negative debate when it first happened. But yeah, it might just be a sign of maturity rather than anything else. But as I think it's an interesting point to just pose questions about, are the directors acting in the interests of the body that they're directors of? Which is, by definition, that is a requirement. If you're a director of an organisation, you have to put its interests above those of any other party, including your employer, and that's a tough thing to do. And that's true of any NGO, or any board of trustees, independent directors, etc. Anyway, I thought it was quite thought-provoking. I would commend it to you to have a look at Michael's article. Other stuff, AFRINIC has finally elected a new board. It's taken several years because of a whole series of governance challenges and problems in appointing directors because of actions taken by some of the stakeholders, which meant that they didn't have a quorum to make decisions. Here a series of problems which we don't need to go to on here. So it looks like good news, but I was aware that I think the most senior judge in Mauritius had been directed to undertake a review last month. So I don't know whether these board appointments could be overtaken by that or not. So it was just the point I was making in my comment there, that hopefully it will be stabilised, but there's probably a few more acts to happen before that saga comes to a proper end. And then finally, just for completeness, those of you that have an interest in policy, I came across this summary of 92 new global cyber policies from around the world in the second quarter of 2025. So literally does what it says on the tin. It's just, it looks across all the different markets to pull out sort of public policy initiatives that have been announced in the second quarter of the year. So quite a useful place just to capture all of those together. And then I mentioned this a few weeks ago, but there's another reminder came up the sort of tail end of last week that if you're running any Windows 10 stuff, support ends in the middle of October. So you've got just under a month before that completely is out of support. But hopefully you knew that already and that isn't a surprise. I obviously won't go through this. There's a whole bunch of other things that caught my eye over the week, which I've just listed. A variety of stuff to see if there's anything there. Yeah, interested to see Sweden pushing the EU for restrictions on social media on children, maybe following the footsteps of Australia. There was a really fun one, the fourth one down, which I will highlight. Albania has apparently appointed the world's first AI-made minister. You should read that. I'm not convinced that's a good thing, but there you are.
So that's a minister of AI, or an AI that is a minister that is operated as an AI.
Unless I misread it, and I was tired, so I'm apologising in advance if I've misled you, but it appeared to be the latter, scarily. A virtual minister.
Okay, Canada has a minister of AI who's a journalist and knows nothing about tech, so
okay,
it might be better if he was virtual.
Yeah, okay, you could debate which of those two is the better answer.
At least you could tell him he's wrong, and he would change his mind.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, that'd be an interesting discussion. Is it better to have an AI as a minister or someone who knows nothing about the subject matter as a minister? Yeah, discuss.
In another forum, when this news was discussed, the title is Albania has become the first country in the world to have an AI minister. I made the joke that I was so sure Trump would have been the first one to do that.
Yeah. Or possibly is. Who knows? You know, have we all been fooled by some amazing AI? The first AI president discuss. Right, swiftly moving on, and as I say, there's loads of other things, including, again, midway through the second screen, undocumented radios found in solar-powered devices. So be careful what things you buy. You may have some surprises in your purchases if they come from less good sources. Like, say, I've got a typo in there with a missing heading. there should have been two separate things. The sort of third from bottom. One was APNIC, an article measuring the performance of the OneWeb satellite network, and the second one about a really big DDoS attack. Those are two separate things. So yeah, I got the OneWeb sort of link in twice. So apologies for the confusion there. Okay, anyway, so that was everything in the headlines. I say there's quite a lot of stuff from the last week. Just to remind you, deadline today, if you want to submit a talk for consideration for RIPE 91, taking place later in October in Bucharest. Also, today, if you want to put a submission for the RIPE DNS working group, it's got a call for proposals. So that's separate to sort of presentations for the plenary for RIPE, if you like, to put anything into the working group. So bear that in mind. I think Will mentioned that as well on the call last week. It's also the deadline for the super early registration cutoff for ITF 124. So if you're going to Montreal, you can save some money by registering today. And then later this week, if you're thinking of going to the RSA conference in San Francisco next March, if you register by the 19th, so you don't actually register, you just put your expression of interest by the 19th, then when you come to register, then you'll save $100 on the registration fee. And then there's other stuff coming up later on. But those are the most immediate ones. I think also, although, sorry, bottom of the slide, sorry, just in case Kathy might know the answer to this, so warning you, Kathy. I think the deadline for submissions for OARC 45 lightning talks, which are I think the last sort of substantive slot on the day 2 of the OARC meeting, I think that the deadline is the end of the first day. But when I looked it up, I couldn't find an actual deadline. So that's my best guess, hence it's in italics.
That is correct. They will open on the morning of the conference and close the same day. So if you want to submit a lightning talk, be very, very ready with it to submit once the conference is opened. But before, it'll be 5 p.m., 1700 local time at the conference. It will close. The reason being that the program committee would like to go out to the social, but will need to actually choose what's going to be a lightning talk before they're allowed to do so.
That's probably wise, rather than after you've had the benefit of the social. You may make some interesting decisions after that.
Well, yes. I mean, the people whose talks are accepted might need to do a little bit of prep once they've been accepted as well.
Right, also true. Yes, both of those are very, very good points. So, and from memory, they're in person only and 10 minutes.
No, because we've got so much material that we rejected, and some of the talks that we rejected, we said in the rejections, it'd be really nice to give us a tempting 5 minutes. We haven't got much time for lightning talks. We're going to do a quick, fast, snappy 5 minutes a talk, and we've got space for 6 of them. So okay. Make it fast, make it compelling, make it snappy. You won't get Q&A afterwards. You have to do that at the social. You have to do that at some point afterwards, maybe at the coffee break. But make them fast, make them snappy, make them grabby. But 5 minutes, that's it. Snap, 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 snap.
It is a lightning talk. I'm impressed.
Seriously lightning. I may completely fall over on this. It may be a complete disaster, but that's what we decided we were going to do.
Okay, sounds exciting. So stay awake for day 2. If you blink, you'll miss them.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Right, so there you are. So it's as on the slide, it is correct. It is the 7th, 5 p.m. to be precise. And again, there's as I say, more deadlines later on, but you've got more time for those. and there's loads of other events coming up. It is that time of year, even just in September through to middle of November, as you can see, including I mentioned RIPE and also ITF in Montreal, but loads of other things as well. So plenty of stuff of interest over the coming ups. And actually, I should also mention one at the top of the screen, which is on Wednesday. This is the second consultation on updating ICP2. In the unlikely event you don't know what that is, that's the governance processes around the regional internet registries, which hasn't been updated since the early 2000s. So they're about 20 years old, I think prompted by the AFRINIC issues. There was a public consultation, a new draft has been published, having a second consultation, and this is just an audio about the second consultation, which you may find of interest amongst many other things that are happening. And then finally from me, as I said at the start of this call, the discussion on ADOT and ADOC has been moved to the 29th of this month with Sarah. We then have Jim, so this is newly confirmed, and I think some colleagues from other institutions. He was on the call. I think he's not.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you are.
Sorry, I was just decloaking. Yes, I'm looking to get the brains behind the research, which isn't me. I've been helping with the draft to address some DNS challenges. Really has been my role. So, but it looks like I'm corralling those to give a talk on that. That'd be good.
Excellent. Yeah, that should be really interesting. I mean, given all the fantastically, well, the horrifyingly interesting stuff that came out of a sort of presentation on IoT security at RIPE, this I think will be riveting. So yeah, looking forward to that. Other new things I just highlight at the end of November, sort of jumping right down the screen. We got the co-authors of Internet Draft on considerations for protective DNS server operators. I think 4 Chinese co-authors sort of confirmed to come on the call to talk about their draft. And since I know there are a number of people here who have a specific interest in protective DNS, I thought I would mention that. And there's then tentatively 1st of December, it may be later in December, I mentioned Yevgenia will come on to sort of talk about discovering the discovery of DDR, but extending probably into DNR and related topics as well. So that will be maybe the 1st, maybe slightly later in December. And then I've got a few things to schedule, including some topics which I pulled out from the OARC schedule, which I thought warranted some further time post OARC for additional discussion, which I've included on the dates TBA there. So hopefully I'll firm those up over the next few weeks. And that is more than enough from me. So let me stop sharing my screen. And apologies for talking at you for so long, but open up to get input from other people. And Alexa gets the prize for being sort of quickest off the mark. So Alexei, do come in.
May I share my screen as well?
Of course you can. Yeah.
Okay, there we are. So I'm going to Baltic NOG next week. It's the first ever Baltic NOG in Vilnius in Lithuania, and I noticed some DNS-related presentations. It's a two-day event. There's going to be monitoring DNS root DNS prefixes, and then I was asked on a network resilience panel, and root DNS and country code DNS is something that in Europe we think as part of network resilience. So it's going to probably come up in that panel discussion. And I was initially asked to give a completely different presentation, which is here conveniently the very last one. But there's also a presentation from Ukraine. Where was it? Here we are. Internet during wartime, resilience of Ukrainian ISPs. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that.
Oh, fantastic. And I must admit, someone, forgive me, I can't remember off the top of my head the name of them, gave a presentation on resilience of Ukrainian ISPs at the last RIPE meeting. And yeah, it puts into perspective the sort of resilience challenges that other ISPs have when they sort of shared some of their learnings about resilience, which were a whole different level of challenge with regards to resilience. So yeah, quite humbling to hear that. But anyway, yeah, that looks like an interesting 2 days that you got there. So can you put a link to that in the chat if you wouldn't mind, and I'll add that to my list of events so people have it as well. Fantastic, thank you. Okay, anything from anyone else? And anyone else got anything on their mind at the moment? I clearly haven't been, by the way, looking at the chat most of the time. I'll pull out anything of interest there from that later to pull in. So if there's anything in there that anyone thinks is noteworthy, please just jump in with that. Nope, not seeing any further hands raised. All right, well, look, I hope that was useful. It was good to have a little bit more time to talk about some of the other stuff that's happened for a change, particularly this week, rather helpfully, as a lot of stuff had happened. As you can see. So I trust that's given you some food for thought, some things to follow up on post-call. Have a fantastic week, as always, everyone, and look forward to catching up same time next week. So see you all then. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Andrew.